Good morning, everybody in the United States, and good afternoon to everybody in Tanzania. I see there's quite a few people that are still joining, so we're going to probably start in the next 1 or 2 minutes. Um, and we'll start off with an introduction from Ben. So, Ben, if you are online, if you could tee yourself up, and I think we'll start in a minute. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. Once again, afternoon to the colleagues in Tanzania. I think some members from the Tanzanian chamber are having a little bit of difficulty logging in. They were going to run with the introduction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick off with an introduction to our team and a couple of things that we're going to be covering today. So first of all, thank you very much for joining. My name is Gavin van der Berg. I represent the US Africa Trade Desk. We've got some very talented colleagues that have recently joined our organization, and they're going to be available to answer some questions and discuss the shifting landscape in bilateral trade between Africa and the United States. So I would like to introduce you, first of all, to Bill Fanjoy. Bill, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, good afternoon all. Bill Fanjoy, and recently joined U.S. Africa Trade Desk from USAID, Prosper Africa, where I was for a number of years as a senior trade advisor. And before that, I was with the commercial section of the U.S. Embassy and served in 6 embassies in Africa. So am very versed in two-way trade and investment in that trade, and very versed in connecting you to American partners. Thank you so much. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Bill. Jeremy, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. And thank you, everybody, for having us on today. My name is Jeremy Faber. I manage communications and government affairs here in Washington, D.C. for the U.S. Africa Trade Desk. I spent the last 10 or 12 years working with the State Department and USAID and embassies across the world, including in South Africa and Zambia. And I have led several large events like the African Leaders Summit and several other big things here in Washington. Really looking forward to working with Gavin and the team to really communicate out to the world about what's going on in trade between the U.S. and Africa. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jeremy. Just want to check if Ben has been able to join us yet. Ben or Rhonda?
I believe Blaine is logging on now.
Okay. Well, whilst Ben is logging on, I given the shifting trade focus and the dynamics of the bilateral trade that's going on, we have prepared a pretty comprehensive deck that encompasses approximately 50 pages and should be able to answer all of your questions. My advice is don't worry about taking notes right now. At the end of today's presentation, there's going to be a QR code, and you can actually download the full comprehensive presentation. I think there's going to be a lot of questions, so please pop your questions into either the chat or the Q&A. And what we're doing is we're actually cutting our presentation short today to what we normally do in order to be able to answer a lot of the questions that I think everybody is going to have. With that being said, we have to go through a disclaimer, which I'm going to pause here for literally 30 seconds. Please make sure that you read this disclaimer. It's just basically outlining that from a US-Africa Trade Desk perspective, we are a commercial entity. We don't claim to represent any US government agency, nor do we claim to represent any country or their specific policies. We purely focused on trade. Everything that we do is fully compliant with the necessary regulations, both in the countries in which we work, as well as the current administration's shift in trade policy. So I'm going to go back to that, and hopefully, Ben, if you're online, if you want to run an intro.
Morning, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Sorry, I've been having some technical issues. I'm back on now. So first of all, we want to thank everyone for taking time. And I know it's different time zones for everyone. And so we truly appreciate you guys jumping on this call. I am the president and CEO of the Tanzanian American Chamber of Commerce in the US. We're headquartered in Dallas. And we also we run the Tanzanian trade office here in close collaboration with the embassy and SAID specifically, who I believe is on this call. And so it's a partnership, basically public-private partnership, where we are, our one sole mission is to increase a two-way trade, right? While we are increasingly seeing Tanzanians that are able and willing and capable to invest in the United States, we are working with them, holding their hand, going through the process with them, finding the right home for them here in the United States. We've had, I think, a couple of the last, since 2025 started, that have shown interest, but also wanting to make sure we pave the way through the right partnerships, such as USATD, to pave the way for more goods and services from Tanzania to make their way to American stores, American households, because we do have some very high quality products. But like I said, at the same time, make sure that Tanzania is aware of what goods and services can come from the United States, what resources exist in the United States to facilitate and support those in the U.S. trying to partner in Tanzania. It could be through machinery or high captured products that Tanzania needs badly, especially as you try to mechanize and upgrade a value addition value chain in Tanzania to be able to meet the demand here. So we are very, very happy to be part of this call. I am on this call with my colleague, Rhonda, based in North Carolina. And our team is spread across the U.S. And so that was intentional, very strategic, so that we can be able to serve our clients and both sides from any part of the world, any part of the U.S. rather. So, well, thank you so much, everyone, and look forward to hearing from everybody and learning. And if you have any questions that is pertinent to the Trade Office or the Chamber of Commerce, feel free to let us know, and I'll put my email in there just for future reference. Thank you for having us.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Ben. Is there anybody else on your team that would like to introduce themselves? Okay. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to kick off. And just as I mentioned, this is a very, very comprehensive deck in terms of where we are. But given the current trade situation, everything is very fluid. So there is a lot of things that we have to adapt on each specific day, literally these days. based on information that is coming through. So we're going to try our very best to communicate all of this to you. What I do, however, encourage everybody to do is to pop your questions into the Q&A or otherwise the chat. And we're going to try to get to as many of them as what we possibly can. But also, feel free to join the USATD network. There is no cost to do so. We update our social media quite often. And we're also going to be starting to publish a lot of newsletters, which I think will answer a lot of the questions that you might have. So with that being said, I'm going to kick off into one of our first slides, which is basically pertaining to the African Renaissance and why Africa. So there is an extensive interest from the United States to kind of tap into the world's next biggest growth market. And that's, we all know that that is going to be Africa. It's a known fact that by 2050, 1 in every 4 people will be living on the continent of Africa. And it's also one of the fastest growing consumer markets. Now, what that does is it opens up a significant opportunity, not just for exports from Africa to the United States, but also from the United States to Africa. And where that comes into play, pertinent to you as Tanzanian producers, is as this level of interest increases in terms of investment, so does the capacity building, which then makes you more efficient in your ability to produce and export to the United States. Very, very keen interest as well in the fastest growing population growth. Obviously, it's an increased consumer market, but it's also a good precursor to understanding that there is going to be good labor, good quality labor, well-experienced labor to be able to produce to the United States requirement levels. There is also a significant growth in the United States for new and diverse suppliers. So one of the big things that we're starting to see at the moment, based on the shift in terms of tariff policy, you'll see that we work with a significant amount of retailers, and the opportunities that are now being created for African producers in particular is that a lot of these retailers are looking at diversifying their supply chains. So they are now all starting to look for mechanisms in which they can engage directly with producers. And we'll get to a couple of specifics a little bit later as to a clear, cognizant example of that. Getting back down to supply chain, continuity of supply is of tantamount importance to all of our retailers. So the growing population, fast urbanization, but also the rural population growth, where a lot of the agricultural products that we're interested in comes from, also ensures that there is the ability to ensure that there's continuity and consistency as well, which is critically important. And the next point in our slide is expanding beyond AGOA. Everybody knows that Africa has substantially benefited from the AGOA agreement. Whilst there is no clear and firm decision that we are aware of whether AGOA is going to be renewed, we think as a company that it would be pertinent for all of the producers to start to plan for beyond AGOA. The Tanzanian government is making some very, very good progress, some very significant progress in working with the United States Trade Representative in forging a bilateral trade transaction, bilateral trade deal. As we are a private entity, we're not privy to what those arrangements are, but we know that a very proactive approach is being taken to protect the interests of Tanzanian exporters to the United States. So a little bit about the trade desk. We are a demand-driven model. That's really what we're all about. Our initial constitution under the original USAID and Prosper Africa relationship that we had was that anything that we touched was not allowed to unseat a domestic producer here in the United States. So we weren't allowed to engage with a producer that was merely trying to buy market share by a cheaper product. We also want to ensure that everything that we do is fully transparent. So we have built a very, very robust ERP and CRM system. And those of you that are registering on our network will obviously start to be engaged through that network. And there's various steps that we take in each one of the engagements that we have. But core as well is obviously the supporting to promote equitable market access, resilient supply, continuity, and that whole trade-driven dynamic that we're all starting to see shift here in the United States. But our ultimate core focus is in bridging the gap between what American retailers are wanting, okay, and what we can actually produce out of Africa. So we're not just enabling trade, we basically believe that we're shaping the future of shared prosperity. And a couple of mechanisms in which we do that. So the key points that we're doing is we have a strategic alliance where we are working with various state departments, Department of Commerce, etc. And that's really to provide resilience in the supply chain. Again, you know, a classic example of this is there's an abject fear amongst a lot of retailers and the general consumer, and a lot of misinformation out there that tariffs are going to increase consumer prices here in the United States. Well, we take a very different opinion. Our opinion is that not only does it balance the trade, but it also creates an opportunity for those Tanzanian suppliers that are looking at dealing directly with the United States. So instead of your products going to third-party countries like Vietnam or China or anywhere else to be processed, we're having a look at some innovative ways in which we can leverage both capacity in Tanzania as well as capacity in the United States to come up with some unique solutions of getting your products directly into the US market. We've got some really, really good team members as part of our organization, and they provide really good insight and expertise into overcoming, you know, these trade barriers. And as I mentioned, we are a demand-driven organization. We don't speculate in any inventory. Everything that we do with our retail partners fills a void that they either have in their existing supply line or de-risks their existing supply line by bringing in additional producers and suppliers from Tanzania. We've got a very, very comprehensive vendor network, which I'm going to cover in one of our other slides. But we also work very, very closely with all of the chambers across Africa, in particular in this particular case today, we're working very, very closely with all the various organizations within Tanzania to make sure that there's full transparency and the full ability to be able to clearly communicate with you as to the shifting dynamics and have a look at mechanisms in which we can help you de-risk your business. We really, really have a look at how our strategic partnerships work well for you. So we have 2 retail activation teams. Those retail activation teams have a lot of people embedded within all of the retailers. And what that allows us to do is to be able to take a product directly to a specific buyer within a large organization such as Walmart and get very, very clear and concise answers. So whilst we do attend some of the national trade shows, we also have very, very specific ECRM trade focuses where we would really drill down into perhaps in the sweets and snacks where we would specifically focus on cashew nuts or macadamia nuts or something along that line, or be able to communicate back to the chamber where there is a void within the existing US retail supply line. Classic example of that is going to be something like dried organic mango, or something along that line, where we would then push back into the chamber to have a look at what resources they have or what potential suppliers they have, as well as the U.S. commercial services in the embassy in Tanzania that can assist with that. Everything that we do has to follow our broad ethical mission. So our company stand is that we would like to give more than what we take. And that means that we have very robust standards when it comes to labor conditions. We have very robust standards when it comes to sustainability. And that allows us to be able to clearly articulate traceability across to our retailers. So what makes us a little bit different is our approach to addressing some of the supply chain hurdles that you as Tanzanian producers might have faced historically. And this really comes from our own experience in supplying some of our own products out of Africa. And a couple of these challenges are prohibitive listing and slotting fees. And I'm sure that a lot of you have come across this in the past, where a retailer might have expressed an interest in your product. They're not too sure how well it's going to sell, so they charge a substantial listing and slotting fees. Depending on which retailer it is, it could be something like $2,000 per item. But then if you're going to go into a big national retailer, it might be substantially higher, you know. What we've got is that we've got the majority of all of the retailers that work within our system, because we're providing them with full transparency in terms of pricing, all the way down to what we actually pay you for your product. They've waived most of these listing fees, which then definitely gives a competitive advantage. In the instances where we are the vendor of record, we also have a broad spectrum public liability insurance policy. So you will know that to list with a retailer here in the United States, you've got to provide them with anywhere between $2 and in some cases $5 million worth of public liability insurance. And that can be very, very expensive if you're a single producer. It could cost anywhere between $90,000 and $120,000 a year. So we've got a group umbrella public liability insurance policy. And as long as we're involved in the transaction in some shape or form, we allow that umbrella policy to actually be utilized as well. I always say that it's very difficult to get onto shelf, but it's even more difficult to be able to stay on the shelf. And we are very, very data-driven business. Retailers, as you can well understand, somebody like a Costco probably runs 2,000 SKUs, but somebody like a Walmart might have 25,000 SKUs. With the advent of AI these days, there is retailers that are purely using algorithmic data-driven insights into the performance of a specific SKU. And if the SKU is not performing, it's just going to be eliminated. So what we do is we purchase all of the data in order to be able to make real-time informed decisions as to how we can actually ensure that we get the product to stay on the shelf. And because of our scale, one of the other added benefits that we have is some really, really good logistics and air freight capacity. So the route to market, we've got a lot of that covered, whether it be cold chain, ambient, dry goods, etc. We've got a lot of that covered. And then one of the very, very important reasons that we have public relations is to very clearly articulate to the US consumer the benefit of the Tanzanian products. And that might be everything from organic to the social standards that you utilize, entrepreneurial businesses, women-owned businesses, all of those kind of elements, those salient features that historically you would be able to charge a premium for, a lot of these days are purely a given. So we will coordinate with the various chambers as well as with your Tanzanian embassy, etc., in public relations campaigns to ensure that the US consumers are fully informed about exactly what you're offering. So how do we operate? We've got a global office, which is based here in Orlando, where some of my team is based. We've got representation up in the north part of Florida in Jacksonville, and then our West Coast team is actually based out of Los Angeles. Our back office support structure is in Mauritius, and we've got offices in Johannesburg as well. But I think, and then obviously Jeremy's based in DC, and Bill is based wherever we really want him, but at the moment he's in El Salvador. I think what is very critically important is to understand that our work is successful based on the work that we do with the Tanzanian Chamber. Partnerships is of critical importance to us. So one of the reasons why a lot of retailers is looking to us to fill that unmet need is that we have the ability to provide them with traceability data. And you'll see that this little block says we've integrated blockchain. A lot of people go into an absolute panic because they think blockchain is difficult. It's really not. Once we ask you to start uploading some of your certificates, whether it be an FDA compliance or a food safety certificate, etc., all of that automatically populates into our system, and we have the ability to provide that visibility down to our retailers. And then we also have a shipping validation step. Now, that shipping validation doesn't necessarily mean the product is already in the container. If we're dealing with a crop, for example, so again, let's take the example of cashew nuts. We pride ourselves in long-term offtake agreements with large retailers. So what we are going to be doing is working very closely with the producers to understand how the crop is doing. So 6 or 7 months before the harvests actually start, what is the outlook looking like? Is the crop going to be okay? Is there going to be shortages in the market? Is there going to be a surplus? And that allows us to make informed decisions and start feeding that information back. Critical is obviously finance. So we've got a great team based out in New York called EAS, and they assist in having a look at every single transaction and how we can actually fund that. And that pulls in everything from the Africa Development Bank to some banks here in the United States, like JP Morgan, African banks like ABSA, Rand Merchant Bank. We've got a great relationship with Regions Bank here, Citibank. And then we have an MOU in place with a great organization based out in New York called Bayless. And really what they do is they have a look at investments, strategic investments into Africa. And what makes their investment decisions easy or easier is when there is a firm offtake for your product here in the United States. So for example, if you're producing a particular product and the demand starts to exceed your supply capacity, that's where we can tap the teams at Bayless to have a look at doing an investment to help you expand to be able to fill the demand from the retailers. We also have a relationship with another ex-USAID grantee called the Gate Solutions. And what that does is, as part of our onboarding process, is we run a very detailed analysis on each of the products. And that's everything from labeling compliance, FDA compliance. We actually drill down to the ingredients that you utilize. There is a lot of shifting in terms of what ingredients can and can't be used. But even if it comes to something like textiles, as an example, the team from Agate will really drill down into the component of that so that we are assured that as these tariffs start to change and start to shift, that we've got everybody strategically placed to understand what that cost is going to be and how we can actually tweak certain elements. And it might be just increasing the amount of US cotton or Tanzanian cotton in a particular garment rather than using a third country fabric that could benefit from any shift in tariff policy. We've then got a great logistics team that is based out of Johannesburg called +0. They give us fantastic global rates on Maersk, as well as IAG cargo. So if we're dealing with any fresh produce, any sensitive cargo, etc., we have got the ability to move cargo anywhere in Africa that British Airways or the BA Alliance lands through the European markets directly to an airport here in the United States where British Airways, American Airlines, or the IAG Cargo Alliance actually lands. What that does is it also provides a competitive edge if it's a produce item to be able to get a highly sensitive produce product directly to the closest DC of one of our big customers. We have a team from the regulatory side, which provides us with FDA guidance, as well as a team based down in Miami from Alpha Brokers that really has a look at anything that is USDA, has a USDA connotation attached to it. We also have a fantastic relationship with TQL Logistics, and they provide all of the dry age, cross-docking, FTL, LTL. So, just getting the container to port is one element. Added onto that is how do we get it out of the port? Where is it going to? And that might mean that it actually might even need to go into storage. So we've got great logistics and storage rates from Lineage Logistics. The route to market that we take is a three-pronged route. We have an omni-channel, which is basically online, but I would say that 99% of our focus is really, really on the direct relationships with both the retailers as well as the food service. And food service historically used to be all about the price. And they used to source a huge amount of their products out of the Asian markets. A lot of those food service clients and the big guys, Gordon Food Services, Cisco, etc., are really, really intensively looking at expanding their purchases directly out of Africa now because they have a risk of increased tariffs coming out of the Asian markets. All of this flows into a very, very robust ERP and CRM tool that I mentioned to you a little bit earlier called Acumatica. And you'll start to see that you'll start to receive some communication from our team out of the Acumatica system, because what that allows us to do is to house all of the data centrally, and that really enhances the customer relationship management, both with our retailers as well as with you as the supplier. But it also allows us to be able to provide information back to the Department of Commerce, the Department of State, the Tanzanian Embassy, the Tanzanian Chambers, etc., where it might be relevant in terms of closing that loop. And that's everything from having a look at what the non-trade barriers might actually be, to having a look at justification for reducing or requesting a reduction in a particular tariff, because it might directly benefit a US consumer for that to actually happen. The roadmap to implementation in terms of, as I mentioned, we are not a US government agency. We don't claim to represent any of these organizations, but what we do is we take all of the information that they actually provide us with and pass that information through our system to be able to make informed decisions to our retailers. So one of our core retailers is Kroger. We then have PFG, that is our primary food service company. Our retail activation team on the West Coast, Africa Trade Sales. And then we have a dedicated team that really looks after predominantly our US Costco, Walmart, and Sam's Club operations. And we're already vendors with all of these retailers, and we've already started supplying a lot of product that we bring in from sub-Saharan Africa directly into retail. We've got a great team up in the Northeast that particularly handles the Ahold Delhaize group. And under the Ahold Delhaize group, you've got Giant, Food Line, Hannaford, Stop and Shop, a small regional retailer called Wakefern, Market Basket, which is, although they're only 95 stores, they a volume driver store for us. They also handle another big box retailer called BJ's. Dave's is one of those stores where if we were having a look at piloting or testing a program or having a look at something that is really unique, it's a high-end consumer shopper up in the Northeast. That also then goes to King Cullen's, Roche Brothers, and then we start adding in some of the bigger regional retailers such as Vice, King's, as well as Acme. On the Africa trade sales side, Dollar General is one of our big clients. I think they're over 20,000 stores now. We've then got HEB, which is a very, very great supporter down in the Southern Texas region. And then even when it comes to components such as vitamins or something like a shea butter or something along that line, we've got a great relationship with CVS. And then our second tier retailers is the likes of Meijer, Albertsons, Fresh Time, Whole Foods, and then a couple of the other food service distributors, Bazzuto's, Unify, KeHE, and some of you might have worked with KeHE in the past. Our relationship with KeHE is we don't do anything on consignment. We work directly with the retailers, and KeHE is the distributing partner that those retailers actually want us to work with. Some of the other retailers that are on the rise with us at the moment is Target, Publix. Aldi is aggressively growing in the United States. Southeastern Grocers has recently been purchased by Aldi. And then obviously in Southern California, we've got a really, really high-end retailer called Gelson's. Great operators, very receptive to trying out a new product and seeing exactly how that's going to work. The categories in which we deal with, fresh produce, so that's fruit, vegetables, herbs, meat and seafood, where it is compliant, prepared foods, both on the bakery side, canned goods, pantry essentials, huge for us. Grains, legumes, nuts, spices, oils, etc. Rising demand here in the United States. We also deal obviously in frozen foods, beverages, and then we split out our beverage section from our alcoholic beverage section because there's very specific regulations that we need to follow. Recently, we've also started to move into floral. So we've started shipping proteas and floral arrangements from South Africa into US retailers. Supplements, as I mentioned, big demand from CVS, and then obviously body care products that goes both into mainstream retail as well as the likes of a CVS. Textiles and apparel is a growing category for us. And then for our sins, we've also recently started working in critical minerals. I don't think that's really relevant for today. So the team that you're going to be engaging with, everything on a strategic side and our engagements with the Tanzanian chambers as well as with the embassies kind of flows between Jeremy, Bill, and myself. But you'll start to have people like Sue, Martin, Fran, who runs our continental services in Africa, and then our back office team, which is led by Muz, and you'll have Stephanie reaching out to you, as well as Linley and Manish, to kind of really ensure that you're onboarded. We then got a great team from Africa Trade Sales, which is led by Brian McDaniel. And then this is the team that is actually going to be doing one-on-one meetings with you to understand your product and know where we can actually strategically place that so that it is set up for the best possible success. So why are a lot of the retailers working with us? We directly benefit their US customers. Tariffs are creating this impression that there is going to be significant food inflation. Yesterday, Amazon was kind of pulled over the coals by the White House, because what they've done is on the Amazon website, they've actually started to advertise a price, and then they've put pre-tariff price. That predominantly affects most of the products that have been flowing out of China, and not so much the stuff that is coming out of Africa, because at the moment we still standardized on that 10% tariff. But again, working with us, the retailers have the ability to diversify their supply offerings. It's also starting to provide them with a competitive advantage. And yesterday, before we had our call, Ben and I were chatting and having a look at how we can actually start taking a large majority of what Tanzania is producing directly into the US market. Now, whilst that might create the impression that you're going to increase the trade deficit, what it does is it allows us to justify, the recommendations in terms of policies to ensure that we can demonstrate that there is a direct benefit to the US consumer. So by cutting out all of these third-party countries, what that really does is it ensures that we can get your product a better price to you as the actual producer, which allows you then to increase your capacity and reinvest in your market. But also it gives our retailers better visibility in terms of their supply chain, which then increases their confidence in your ability to actually execute on their orders. That then brings in cost efficiency, supply chain diversification, and that traceability and transparency ensures that the quality products are not compromised by these third-party countries. So again, have a looking at something like cashew nuts. We're looking at bringing cashews and macadamias directly in from Tanzania into the United States, rather than sending them off to Vietnam and India, etc., where they blended with old stock or cheaper product coming in from Cambodia, or India, which then kind of just looks at buying market share and reducing prices. A big thing in terms of US customers is sustainability and ethical sourcing. And because we are now doing the business directly with you as the Tanzanian producers, we can ensure that that is very clearly articulated. I'm going to jump across to the slide in terms of how it benefits you as the Tanzanian exporter. And what we do is we provide you with very, very clear market access, right? So we're going to really have a look at analyzing your product, making sure that it has a niche place. We're not just going to have a look at signing everybody on board. And I want to make it very, very clear, there is no cost to join our network whatsoever. The only way that we as the US Africa Trade Desk make any money in any transaction is if the transaction is actually successful on a purely commercial basis. We don't charge a consultancy fee. We don't charge retainers. We don't charge for any of the advice that we give, or any of the access to some of our guidance, such as the FDA registrations, etc. We also act as a trade facilitation partner. So in some instances, retailers that we work with would prefer to deal directly with you as a supplier, and we will obviously be able to facilitate that as well. By understanding your product and understanding capability, capacity, and cost, we know which retailer we believe your product will be the most successful in. So we're not just going to take a product and try to sell it to a Walmart or try to place it into a Costco, etc. If it is something that needs regional representation, because that's what the dynamic of your product actually is, we're going to recommend to you which retailer is going to be the most receptive to your product. Now, bear in mind, whilst we might be the face of the product in the original engagements with the retailers, it is critically important that you have a vested interest in your product success going forward. And therefore, there is continuous communication and continuous involvement with you and our retail partners. We provide you with logistics support. Most importantly, we'll provide you with market data and market intelligence, and then also provide you with some networking opportunities. Some of the other benefits is having a look at what financial services we can actually tap into, whether it be PO funding, receivables funding, capacity building, etc. Capacity building is obviously critically important as well, and then leveraging promotion and marketing tools that we have at our fingertips. Risk mitigation is critically important. There's a lot of people out there that are offering support services, etc. We want to make sure that you guys can reinvest all of those costs that other people were charging to act as your broker on a retainer basis, etc. We want you to be able to reinvest that actually into your product and driving your product onto shelf. We also help you with any sustainability or social impacts, and that's, previously it would be linking you up with Prosper Africa or USAID. A lot of those things are going to start coming back as long as we can start showing a return on investment to the US government, the US taxpayer, and a lot of retailers actually have supplier development programs that we're also going to be looking at tapping into. And then obviously one of our big things that we'll be doing is advocating for your product. As I mentioned, this deck is pretty comprehensive. I'm going to jump across to a couple of other slides. And in doing so, there might be some information that you would want to read at a later stage. Please feel free, you're going to be able to download that a little bit later. So how does our process actually work? We've got an 8-step process. And that really starts off with you signing up onto our system. What that does is it creates an automatic customer profile within our Acumatica system, and it triggers our compliance team to start the engagement. The first document that you're going to receive from us is a non-disclosure agreement. It is not a non-circumvention agreement. It is not you giving us exclusivity over your product. It is purely a non-disclosure agreement, which means that we are not allowed to communicate any trade secrets or any ingredients or anything along your product that might be proprietary to you without having you allow us or be involved with any discussion that we're having with the retailer. So that is really there to protect you as the supplier. We then move to what we call the nurturing phase. And that's where you start sharing all of your company information into our system. And that's FDA compliance, HACCP compliance, food safety, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't have that, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to work with you. That then moves us into the qualification step. So we evaluate together with you what your capabilities, your compliance actually is. And if you need a little bit of help, we actually pause there and we go into a retail mentorship program where we help you and we nurture you through all of those processes. And that kind of moves to the next step, which is the development process. I want to point out over here that we do have a lot of producers that can go from step 1 to step 8 immediately. But we really don't want to leave anybody behind. So, youth entrepreneurial businesses, a lot of women-owned businesses, and a lot of small-scale producers. We have a look at how we can assist in aggregating all of those in either, working with sharing containers that we are actually bringing in, and also going through that mentorship program and having a look at how we can tweak and refine your product that is actually going to be in the demand here in the United States. So that provides the overall solution. which is then packaged up and presented directly to the actual category manager, the person who's actually making that specific decision. And they would then might call for some samples, and that would really be to run the proof test, right? So that's testing and validating that the quality actually meets the standards. From a negotiating perspective, you are heavily involved in the negotiation process, and that then obviously turns into what we refer to as the ultimate win. Skipping across to the trade partnership and the importance of embracing the trade partnership. Really what we are looking at doing is the direct partnerships and the supporting sourcing relationships that retail here in the United States wants, together with a Tanzanian chamber, directly to you as the actual producer. That then obviously allows us to offer our retailers a diverse product mix, everything from avocado oil to nuts and spices to textiles, etc. We become the go-to company which we can then communicate back down to you, and Tanzanian producers obviously then have a competitive edge. We also have a look at how we can assist in investing in ISO, organic, fair trade, assist you guys in getting FDA approved where you're not FDA approved, and then obviously having a look at where we can leverage trade facilitation programs. So, that might be large-scale DFC investments that might be needed down the line, and tying it up with various agencies like the African Development Bank, etc. Very, very critical is obviously the ethical sourcing part, and then also having a look at expanding digital trade and adopting technological solutions as well. Some additional benefits in terms of partnering with us. We streamline your market entry. We have a look at, as I mentioned, waiving those slotting fees. We also then have a look at, from a capacity building perspective, and that's getting your products into shelf on your brand initially, but ultimately what the objective is from a long-term perspective is to ensure that we have the ability that if a retailer turns around and wants your product packed in their private label, that we are ahead of the pack to be able to offer that service. I'm going to skip across to page 41, so we're skipping out quite a few at the moment. And this is really what is key at the moment. And that comes to balancing trade and leveraging the opportunities that are created by the trade tariffs that have been placed on a lot of Asian countries at the moment. And where we can have a look at assisting you as a Tanzanian producer on items that you might need from the United States to increase your capacity. And that's everything from mechanization, US produced equipment, etc., US technology. It might be US packaging equipment. It might be production lines, etc., etc. Once we understand what you need to scale up, there is access to a lot of that equipment that traditionally would have come in from China or India, etc., that because we can now very clearly demonstrate a direct demand here in the United States, there is agencies here in the United States that would be assisting US companies to export that equipment across to you. I'm not going to drill down into specifics. We've got an example of cotton production, but we can cover that at a later stage. I know we've got a little bit of time-sensitive information here. I'm going to skip across to page 47, and that is how we engage, right? So what we will do from a US Africa trade desk, perspective is we will communicate a demand alert both to the US Embassy in Tanzania, to the US Embassy in, to the Tanzanian Embassy in Washington, D.C., but more importantly, to your Tanzanian Chamber of Commerce. So our advice to you is to please ensure that you are actively engaged with your chamber so that you know that when we put a trade alert out, that trade alert is communicated across to you. So our team leader in South Africa, Francis Fraser, will be producing that demand alert. AmCham will then share that with you as their relevant members. So we're not going to push out a demand alert for cashew nuts if you are engaged in the textile sector. Really what we're having a look at doing is going very, very deep rather than broad on each of these so that we can be very proactive in filling that immediate unmet need that a retailer actually has. The chamber would then communicate that feedback to us. Again, we register. We encourage everybody to register with us as well as with your chamber, and then the chamber will facilitate the initial meeting. So, once you've joined the chamber will validate for us that you're not an organization that engages in any form of child labor or prison labor or anything along that line. So very high level due diligence will be done. It is a collaborative partnership between all of us where we share a vested interest in ensuring that your product is set up for success. So referrals from the chamber to us, your chamber is very, very proactive. We've seen a flurry of activity on our system over the last 48 hours of companies that have registered from Tanzania in our system. So be patient with us as we start populating all of that into the system. Over the next, 3, 4, 5 to 6 days, you're going to start to see those non-disclosure agreements flowing back through to you. If you haven't received your non-disclosure agreement by Wednesday or Thursday next week, please reach out to our team, okay, and we will ensure that that's activated immediately. The day-to-day activity team will be Fran, Martin, and Suan. And then that obviously then flows into our retail activation team, which will then really have a look at driving your product into a successful state. I'm putting this particular slide up for you just to understand the shift in dynamics of the US customer. On the right-hand side, you will see that there is still a significant consumer focus on shopping in store. And be very, very specific when you communicate to us any form of unique selling propositions that your product actually has, because that then allows us to better understand is our product focus going to be on the omni-channel side, or is the product focus going to be on the physical in-store side? And here you can see on the left-hand side, the top section, that's the type of product that people are buying online. And on the right-hand side, obviously, the type of products that people are buying in store. So if you want to grab it for now, before we turn over and I bring in Bill and Jeremy to communicate to you a little bit on what we're seeing in terms of policy here in the United States. If you want to grab this, you can scan that QR code that you see on the left-hand side. That QR code over there is going to give you the full 50-page presentation today. And if you want to join our network, please feel free just to scan the QR code on the right-hand side. It's going to take you through the registration process. Alternatively, just go to our website, USATD.org. In the top right-hand corner of the website, you'll see Join Our Network. Click on that, answer the couple of questions that's on there. It's free of charge. There's no cost associated with it whatsoever. It just allows us to actually start the engagement process. So with that, I'm going to pause there. And before we start taking any questions, I'm going to pass over to Bill just to give you a little bit of background in terms of insights that we have. Over to you, Bill.
Thanks, Gavin. So what we see, as you can see from the news, is a very fluid situation of tariffs, no tariffs, up and down. So each country that we're working with is preparing for itself its best position to the United States mandate, which is obviously simply to balance the exports and imports with that country, between the United States and that country. So we're taking a very, very proactive role of working with countries to determine what is pragmatic. As we are meeting with a U.S. trade representative in Washington, D.C., their number one question is, how is the trade imbalance going to be balanced? With what products, with what commodities? And that's why they're talking to the U.S. Africa Trade Desk, because we're prepared to begin moving those items. It's been a very interesting journey here over the last few weeks, as U.S. Africa Trade Desk went immediately from one-way trade from Africa to the United States to two-way trade, and found out ever so quickly that our partners who have been buying are also partners that we could utilize in selling. And if they didn't know, if they didn't themselves sell, they knew in the industry who did. And same thing in the African market. And I'm sure we're going to find the same thing with you all in Tanzania, that there are items, and I believe Ben spoke about this in the very beginning, that there are items that make sense for the United States to export for your value chain, to be adding to your value chain, whether it's U.S. machinery or a certain commodity and input, an agricultural input. So in that way, we're working with USTR, USDA to determine what commodities they see as relevant to Tanzania. And then we're looking for you to tell us what those items are. So where USTR is now is input. They want to know from each country what are the items that could be added to the list to balance that trade. So they're just getting information from us, from the countries, and making sure, again, mirroring it with what we can do in the private sector, with the strategies being delivered to them officially by the African governments. So they are then taking that information and making sure that it's real, meaning that these trades can occur within a relatively expeditious time period, and then sending it up to the White House. And the line is not that long, because governments are not getting in their request as quickly as USTR would hope. So we're telling any country that we're working with to get their submission into the USTR as soon as possible, meaning to the U.S. Embassy in country and to the USTR, and we can assist with that. So with that, I hope that helps you understand where the U.S. government is. I'll pass to Jeremy and see what he has to add.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. That was a really great overview. I would just add that this is really a massive opportunity. It's been almost 30 years since we had this sort of reset in the U.S. government. And the negotiations that Bill referred to on the bilateral side from countries in Africa coming to the United States to talk about that, under an AGOA structure, that was never going to happen. So really, this is a way for us to drill down and really get very granular about the trade to address this deficit. And it's just, I just see it as such an incredible opportunity for all of us here who love Africa and love African countries and love African products, who are here in the US and want to see more of that on our shelves. Folks in the US who are worried about prices at the grocery stores. We've been rising and rising and rising since COVID. This is just such an incredible opportunity, and I'll leave it there. Of course, we're a resource for you all. If you do have additional questions, I see a ton in the chat, but after the webinar, we are available to answer those kinds of questions as well. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to ask Ben if you'd like to say a few words, and then we'll move into some questions. I think we still do have a little bit of time. Ben?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just want to appreciate everybody for taking time again, because this is a lot of good information. And I think what Jeremy said, in the new era of trade balance, right? I think this whole thing is very timely. AGOA expires in September, and so we're kind of ahead of the curve, right? Trying to make sure that everything transitions over to the new mantra of trade balance as AGOA phases out, because I don't really foresee AGOA being renewed, right? We've made a lot of effort on the back end, and I think it's not being renewed not because of lack of interest from the US, but it's just that there's this desire to reset how business is done in a way that is mutually beneficial. And certainly, I think all of us on this call, we've been working diligently, especially on the Tanzanian American Chamber side, and the embassy side, trying to, actually, one, we see this as a great opportunity for countries like Africa, right? Because now everything is now leveled out, right? So it's just how you position yourself, how you present yourself, and what benefits you show that will really, determine how any country interacts with the United States. So I think this is very good for us, right? So we can actually now, moving forward, compete almost fairly with the Indians and the Vietnamese and so on, because half of the products is our stuff, right? So this is good. I'm very delighted, and I'm thankful to Garvin and the entire team for your partnership with us. And on the tax side, members of the call can certainly reach out to us, and we will continue to work hand in hand with Garvin and his team through our mechanism and our partnerships to make sure we vet people that do meet your criteria, so that you don't get a flooding of requests and some that may not necessarily qualify. And we'll work with the members on this call to help align, to minimize your time in terms of sifting through what works, what doesn't work, so that you have what is somewhat vetted, right? And so we are very excited, very delighted to start this journey with you, and we look forward to more conversations. And I'm sure we will have a team in Dar es Salaam from TAC, I believe, in July, and we can certainly make some time. Rhonda and I will both be there, and we can make some time to have further engagement on some of these matters. Yeah, and just also, people should know that we do have a Tanzanian American Chamber of Commerce office in Dar es Salaam that can also help answer some of these questions. And we'll try and get a lot of this material from here and make sure we have it stocked in the city, so people can go in and pick notes and get information firsthand. So yeah, all in all, I'm very excited. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, USATD, US Trade Desk, for allowing us to be part of this conversation.
Thanks. Appreciate that, Ben. I did see some questions coming through that on the categories that we shared. We didn't show tea and coffee. There's literally 6,500 products that we touch in some shape or form. And tea and coffee is definitely very, very high on the agenda. That would fall under the pantry essentials category, or the center store category that we actually work with. Sue, I haven't been monitoring the questions. Is there any particular questions or anybody that would like to ask a question?
I do feel that we need to just address Arusha City Council's list of questions. They did have their hand up initially in the beginning. They had a couple of other questions besides the coffee. And then we can move on to Jeffrey, and then there was another person that we can move on to. So that will be the order.
Okay, so let's start with Arusha, if you want to just allow them to unmute.
Okay. All right, you have the ability. Alfalfa Ellen.
I can actually, this is Rhonda, and for the sake of time, I can actually go through. He put his questions in the chat. He's saying that the Arusha City Council, through Mayor's office, is appreciating the discussion. He says they're owning a meat company. The Arusha City Council owns a meat company for over 20 years, and they're looking for potential partners to see how they can partner in business to improve their production and to be able to do business outside of Tanzania, specifically the U.S. through the special program. Can they have an expert who can lead to become part of the trade platform? So we know the supplier platform can be, they can register, so that's not a problem. They can definitely register there. The next question is, Arusha is much more in business of food issues for both retail and wholesale. Is it possible to have something like a commercial center here in Arusha where all the producer suppliers will be eligible for business to be able to provide something like a learning platform to others to provide with records that would be advantageous to Tanzania? And this last question is, if the ability to produce products to sell U.S. Lacks financial capacity to do it effectively through the platform, is there any chance of getting support from other side? Oh, and there's one last question. When it comes to international business challenges, it's often how to get permits to comply with Tanzania requirement. Can this platform assist? That's it.
Cool. So I think what is important to start there is part of the presentation that I did is that we can actually advocate for your product. So once we know and we understand exactly what you can produce, like let's talk, for example, the meat, that is highly regulated by the USDA, right? And what we can actually do is we can understand exactly where in the process the application is, or otherwise facilitate the introduction to the relevant authority. But that is a government to government conversation that needs to be had. When it comes down to perhaps having some resources within the city council, I would highly encourage you to work with the Tanzanian chamber. They would be your initial go-to, okay? And what they can do is they will be able to work with us and our specific member of the team to be able to get your product speed to market as quick as what we possibly can. Really need to emphasize that your go-to is the Chamber of Commerce, they, as well as, you know, even possibly the U.S. Commercial Services in the embassy in Dar es Salaam. That's really, I think, critically important for us to advocate on. Did I answer all the questions?
Thank you, Gavin. The next question and final question that's in the chat is Mansuri Nawab asking, the Tanzanian producers will have a fair ground with the U.S. during pricing of products. His other question is technologies in agriculture like GMO effects in protecting natural seed security. And lastly, tariff changes in projection of trade profit revenues.
Sure. As I mentioned right in the very beginning, the situation with regards to tariffs is extremely fluid at the moment. So we've got a 90-day pause where everybody is getting a 10% except for China. You know, it is our opinion, and I think it's, you know, your chamber's opinion as well, that the likelihood of AGOA remaining in its current form is not very high. our encouragement to US producers in Tanzania is to prepare beyond AGOA, and also to work very closely with your chamber to ensure that you are actively engaged with what the government is going to be proposing to the USTR in terms of what effects that are going to have. And again, you know, as Ben pointed out, by working with us and providing full transparency in terms of pricing and pricing strategy, any tariff should technically be able to be absorbed in this demand-driven approach, right? So there is no third-party country that is going to be producing your product, et cetera, or taking your product out of Tanzania, you know, producing it in China or Vietnam. We're getting it directly into the US retailer. And if you don't have the ability to do final retail packaging or something along that line, there is facilities here in the United States. For example, cashew nuts, we import cashew nuts in bulk, 50-pound bags. They are shelled, we bring them in, we then roast, flavor, spice, package them here in the United States. But it's no longer going to Vietnam, it's no longer going to India, etc. So those are the kind of elements that we can do. But it's understanding exactly what you've got that allows us to ensure that there is full visibility in the supply chain. That then resonates into costs. We don't want to buy market share, right? We have to ensure that there is profitability on your side, because if you are not profitable, you pose a risk to the supply chain and the retailer here in the United States that you might not be able to fulfill orders. So ensuring that you are profitable is of key importance to us. I think we can probably take 2 more questions.
We don't have any other questions in the chat, but I do want to state something that, again, I'm Rhonda Pierce. Sorry, I had technical difficulties in the beginning. I am Board Director and Secretary for Tanzanian American Chamber of Commerce, working with Ben Kazora, the President. We have been facilitating the Tanzanian institutions that have memberships. So a lot of you are on this call through your membership, through different institutions like Sagat or Taha or Tantrade and so on and so forth. So we are helping connect you directly through your institutions. And then some of you have come to us direct. So we will begin to help, as Gavin was explaining, how you will connect with USATD and US Commercial Service. We will help in facilitating that with you, because you've been vetted through those Tanzanian institutions. With that said, I understand Sue put a poll in the chat and would like everyone to participate in the poll, if you will. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, Gavin, to partner with you today.
Perfect. Rhonda, Ben, thank you very much for your time. I'm going to let Bill just quickly wrap up from the commerciality side of it.
Thanks, Gavin. It's been a pleasure being on this webinar, and I hope to have discussions with each and every one of you about two-way trade and investment. And there were questions about investment, and Gavin did speak briefly in his presentation about how we do have attached to the U.S. Africa Trade Desk investors. And so like everything at the U.S. Africa Trade Desk, we are driven by demand. And as there is serious offtake for demand, that draws investment. And so those questions are answered by the depth and the longevity of the trade that we begin today. So I urge all of you all to get onto USAfricaTradeDesk.com, get registered, start going through the system, so we can begin showing the strength of this supply chain and this two-way trade chain to the investors that who are very interested. But we have to start somewhere. This is it, and they will follow. Over to you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Bill. Mine is just a message of hopeful, cautious optimism. Really looking forward to see where things go in the next couple of months, but really see this year as a major turning point in the relations between the United States and Tanzania, other African countries as well. Thank you so much for having us on today.
And from my side, a final wrap up. Thank you for everybody that took the time to join today. I'm sure that there is going to be lots of questions. Please feel free to reach out to us. We're really here to help. We've got everybody's best interests at heart. Echoing exactly what Jeremy said, we see this and the shift in global trade as a significant opportunity for Tanzanian suppliers to capture a fair share of the US market. With that, I'm going to put the last slide back up on the screen for a little bit, and please feel free to download the presentation or the deck, as well as the relevant contact information that might actually be in there. I think that'll be important for you. And once again, thank you everybody for joining.
We don't see the slide, Gavin.
Coming back up, one sec. There you go.
Thank you.